Now when Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, he went on from there to teach and proclaim his message in their cities. When John heard in prison what the Messiah was doing, he sent word by his disciples and said to him, "Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another?" Jesus answered them, "Go and tell John what you see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them. And blessed is anyone who takes no offense at me." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. The idea of the soulmate is very old. Ancient Roman poets like Aristophanes postulated that human beings were fragmented creatures, that we were always searching for our spiritual twin, that the gods had literally torn us apart from. And thousands of years later, and thousands of Hallmark Christmas movies later, the idea persists and invades all of our romantic expectations that we are all destined for partnership with one person. I hope they don't die. And that's funny to me because it's phrased so similarly to a common trope of storytelling, wherein there is a special character, the one, like Harry Potter, the long prophesied, fated child who will grow to fight the ultimate battle for the sake of the world. This one often struggles to accept that mantle, and the people around them do too, always doubting whether or not they are actually the one, but whether the one is the romantic partner or the warrior who will battle the forces of darkness, or maybe sometimes even both. The question is always the same. How do we know you're the one? And that turns out to be John the Baptizer's question for Jesus too. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus has already been fairly busy. Healings and miracles and fighting with Pharisees and exorcisms, and it's been a while since that day when John baptized him in the Jordan, and it seems like they haven't seen each other in a while, months or even years. And between the two of them, there is growing confusion from the people of Israel. Who is the Messiah? Is it John or is it Jesus? They both have disciples. They both are teaching about the coming day of the Lord. They're both attracting big crowds. John is in jail and Jesus isn't, but is that luck? John, though, is not confused. He seems to know who he is not. He understands that his role is to point to the Messiah rather than to be him. But even John is nervous, afraid of getting his hopes up. So from the prison he will die in, he sends a question with his friends and disciples. Are you the one who was promised? Or are we waiting for another? Are you the one? And Jesus' answer is revealing. Tell him the blind can see. Tell him the lame can walk. Tell him lepers are cleansed. Tell him the deaf hear. Tell him the dead are raised. And tell him that finally the poor have had good news brought to them. What do you think that means? In the time of Jesus, there were expectations about who the Messiah would be and what the Messiah would do. And some thought he would be a king like David, overthrowing their oppressors, instituting new governance. And some thought the Messiah would be a priestly figure who would reform and institute new practices in the temple. The Messiah, whoever he was, would bring reversal and light into the darkness of their days. But Jesus had no armies, and Jesus had no part in the ruling authorities, and Jesus did not spend his time reforming liturgy in the temple. He wasn't living and teaching in such a way that he was meeting anybody's expectations. So John's question is authentic, laced with confusion and hope and worry. Are you the one? And Jesus' answer is a very strange yes. Do you see, he says to the disciples of John, do you see all around you the hopeless and the forgotten people who have been touched, who have been remembered, who have been cared for, who have been restored, who have been given new life when nothing was given to them? Do you see the grand reversal all around you, the lifting up of the poor, the good news for the oppressed, the provision of God given once again to the people who have had nothing? Jesus is the one to come. There will not be another. But whether or not that's good news to John and his disciples is another question altogether, because they had hoped for a battle, and Jesus has not come with a sword. In the Christmas story we tell every year, Jesus appears as an empty vessel, a vessel of the hopes of his family and his people, as a tiny child without the ability to self-define, to speak to what he will do and who he will be. All we have are prophetic hopes, his mother's own song, that the child born will scatter the proud in the thoughts of their hearts and bring down the powerful off of their thrones and lift up the lowly and fill the hungry with good things and send the rich away empty. And upon this still image of a sleeping baby, we project onto him all that we hope and wish and want him to be. We live in this painful and hurting world full of pride which rages and corruption which poisons and hatred which makes all of us bleed, and we whisper to the child in the manger, are you the one to come, or are we waiting for another one? The answer we receive is the same one John did, and whether or not we can celebrate it reveals more about us than Jesus. The child born to us this night is born to heal and to restore and to bind together and to love and to do all those things in such a way that it's good news first to the poor, which means that it will probably sound like very bad news to the rich. And it will not be achieved by any of the avenues of power that we know how to wield so well. He is not our soulmate. He is just the lover of our souls. And he is not a warrior king on a path to a battle, but he will be the one who triumphs over death. The child born to the poor, witnessed by the poor, healed and preaching for the poor, who dies poor, is Christ the Lord. Perhaps he is not the one that you would have waited for, but he is the one that was and is to come. A lesson that we must learn over and over and over again. So celebrate with me, friends. The child who is born is the fulfillment of God's good promises. In him there is healing even for us. In him there is life even for us. In him there is love even for us. In him there is a way forward for all of us. May that child be born again and again in your heart, so that like him, you may bring healing, and you may bring love, and you may bring mercy, and you may bring justice, and you may bring good news to the poor, wherever you are.